Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter what time of night or day. It doesn't matter. I'm still just as glad you stopped by the channel. So thanks ever so much. This is the Social Gospel Worship and Learning channel, part of the Social Gospel Worship and Learning Center, an online church based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the pastor and the janitor, Reverend Paul J. Bern, that's Bern, and you have found a source of knowledge, insight, a means of worship, and a whole lot about economic inequality. And Reverend Dr. King Jr., since this is being recorded on the King holiday, this is being done exactly and specifically in honor of him. And so here we go for our Sunday morning message, the hijacking of a dream, I call it. The hijacking of a dream, recapturing Reverend Dr. ML King's legacy. As we celebrate another Martin Luther King holiday today, America needs to perform a reassessment of what this memorial holiday truly means to all of us. On August the 28th, 2011, the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial took place on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Having the dedication of this memorial on the 48th anniversary of the March on Washington was clearly a symbolic gesture, paying homage to one of the many defining moments of the great civil rights leader's life. However, the corporate contributors to this event, along with many of their politicians that were in attendance, were and are symbolic themselves. And so is our incoming President Donald Trump, too. Makes no difference. They are symbols of everything Dr. King was and would be opposed to if he were alive today. These charlatans and hucksters inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. know very well this fact, which is exactly why they, together with the mainstream media and an ever-shrinking segment of prejudiced Americans of all colors and races, continue to desperately try to reshape the image of Dr. King. If these people have their way, Reverend Dr. King and his legacy will stand for nothing more than a superficial image. They fervently wish to recreate him into someone they could feel more comfortable with. This is why most children can only recite one quote in relationship to Reverend Dr. King. I have a dream. Our kids and many of their parents don't even know the whole message about the I have a dream speech. They've never heard it. They were robbed of an important part of their education. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood for much more than what mainstream America has methodically reduced him to. In fact, if he were alive today, many of the corporate warmongering politicians, including President Trump, would be vilifying Dr. King as if he were some crazed, angry black man. This is why we will never hear the likes of Barack Obama quote Dr. King when he referred to the U.S. government as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And that's exactly what it is. Dr. King said those powerful and honest words on April the 4th, 1967, at Riverside Church in New York City, exactly a year before he was assassinated. Nearly 6 decades later, the U.S. government is still the greatest purveyor of violence on earth. You can bet that the following quote will not be read at all in King's memory. And the quote is as follows. Reverend Dr. King's words here. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, and for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. Today, 60 years later, is no longer for the sake of hundreds of thousands, but rather for the sake of millions trembling under our violence. And for that, King could not be silent. Neither will I. Now let's move along. Speaking truth to power. After reading Dr. King's Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence speech, anyone still thinking that he would be in approval of what this current administration is doing in places like Pakistan, Venezuela, Egypt, Syria, Gaza, and Lebanon need to rethink their conclusions. Dr. King was much more than simply a man who was anti-war. He was a man who stood for peace and social justice. He was truly a man of principles and convictions, which is why he was unafraid of speaking truth to so-called power. Here we go. Pardon me for that, please. Remaining silent, as so many gutless politicians and celebrities do today, was not an option within Dr. King's conscience. And because of this, he was routinely targeted by the U.S. government by way of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the devil's minions such as FBI founder J. Edgar Hoover. And yes, I called him a devil's minion because that's exactly what he was. He dared to challenge America's conscience. Talk about Reverend Dr. King. The American empire's military-industrial complex is a vastly profitable behemoth that must be fed a steady diet of wars in order to maintain its existence. Those who threaten the existence of this killing machine become expendable. Dr. King's outspokenness against not only the Vietnam War, but also the military-industrial complex, secured his status as a target. Dr. King's crime, or so-called crime, was that he dared to challenge the conscience of a nation entangled within the web of an imperialist war throughout Southeast Asia. Among other things, he said, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Which one of the political frauds or entertainers in attendance at that dedication to Dr. King's memorial took such a courageous stance and solidarity with Reverend Dr. King Jr.? Which ones? None. That's how many. Zero. They just sat there and silently stared at the floor in shame. We have been, everybody, miseducated. Over $1 trillion have been expended on these foreign wars since 2001. While people in the U.S. are all losing their homes to foreclosures, school systems, are being defunded, and 40,000 Americans die each year due to a lack of health insurance. That's more people than all who died in auto accidents last year. If Dr. King's statement is true, that America's spirit must be on life support, needing an end to its profligate defense spending as part of a multi-tiered remedy for rehabilitation. Dr. King knew very well about the U.S. government's record of going into countries whose governments refused to be obsequious to their addiction to other nations' resources, and then destabilizing them by waging war or by assassinations of leaders, or both. These are, in fact, the kind of immoral acts of war that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be completely opposed to, along with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq before that. His life should give us ample reason to come to this conclusion, and only this conclusion. However, how many children in America know this? I wonder. Dr. King's image has been reshaped by some amoral adults as well as by other adults who have been purposely miseducated. Which creates a conflict of interest. Let me explain. In regard to people of color, as especially poor people of color, Dr. King had a knack for placing their living conditions within the context of institutional racism and its impact on their communities. In 1968, not long after his assassination, not long before his assassination, and Dr. King said, and I quote, "It is incontestable and deplorable that black people have committed crimes, but they are derivative crimes. They are born of the greater crimes of white society." Close quote. The late civil rights leader said those words within a speech he gave to his staff at the SCLC meeting in Frogmore, South Carolina, as he was preparing them for the Poor People's Campaign. His commitment to black people, and poor people in general, was the polar opposite of the last several presidents that we've had, who seemed at times to excel at marginalizing those demographics while catering to their own corporate and military bosses. And the same Beyond Vietnam speech that King gave, the one I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Dr. King gave a prescient warning when he said, and I quote, "When machines and computers profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. Today in 2025, much of the world is suffering from the impact of America's insatiable hunger for global domination. The USA's runaway military-industrial complex continues to take lives away from innocent civilians in places like Venezuela, Gaza, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, and Lebanon, to name a few. The American military-industrial complex creates carnage abroad, while preventing Americans from having things like a world-class single-payer healthcare system. Today in 2025, institutional racism remains a disease that destroys the lives of people of color in America by way of ruthless police brutality, enforced economic inequality, and intentionally unequal school systems, to name just a few. Contemporary runaway capitalism is imposing economic terrorism on countless people and their rapidly disintegrating communities. Dr. King's words then are surely more relevant now than ever before. Today's economic inequality replaces Reverend Dr. MLK's dream. Ain't that the truth? I can quickly explain. Almost done here. The dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial was assured to be a most superficial event, replete with superficial politicians and luminaries, when it was held back in 2013. The organizers of this event and their corporate cronies were promoting and selling everything from expensive hotel rooms, sponsorship opportunities, to high-priced exhibitor space. In essence, they were honoring, quote-unquote, Dr. King by not embracing his legacy of social justice, but by financially capitalizing on his name. There were no speeches of ending America's imperialist wars like Dr. King did. Anyone with such a message trying to get onto that stage in present-day tense would have been swiftly removed by security. There were no speeches about destroying institutional racism in America. Instead, the lie of America being a post-racist country was, and still is, bandied all around. Don't expect any talk about waging a war on poverty. After all, some of the sponsors of the event were, in fact, large multinational corporations such as Walmart and Monsanto and many others that they all benefit from destroying local businesses while dissuading their workers from unionizing. And so it's up to us to do the very best we can do in regards to this matter. Dr. King once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." That's why I refuse to shut up. I will keep posting this stuff over and over again. But hang on, I'm almost done, and the end is the best part. He also famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Ending institutional racism in America, eradicating poverty and homelessness, tearing down the U.S. prison industrial complex by ending the drug wars, and stopping the U.S. military industrial complex's destruction, and endless wars, these are the things that really matter. They matter so much that life and death hinge upon each injustice. It is obvious that we cannot expect Democrats or Republicans to vociferously break their collective silence about the cauldron of social injustices that has been brewing in America for quite some time. That job must be ours, starting with the clergy, like myself. All you other preachers out there, where are you at? Time to join up. Since Congress and the President refuse to do anything, they're not going to do any such thing to help us. We must raise our collective voices and speak truth to power. It's time to stand against them and stand up for voices and speak truth to power. It's time to stand against them and stand up for justice. As the 2025 King Holiday comes and goes, this is the greatest way we can honor the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This is Chloe's Public Relations. And that concludes the Sunday message for this week. Since I'm an online church, this is not brick and mortar, I don't have any way to pass around a collection basket, so I won't bother. It does not bother me. It really doesn't. I don't do this for the money. Surprise, surprise. Unlike many preachers who do. I do this for Jesus Christ and Him alone. Nothing else matters but Him. Nothing. Nothing at all. But if anyone would care to make a donation to help me out, it would be much appreciated. Any amount will do. Anywhere from, say, $3 and up. To help out with the expenses, mainly of which are marketing and internet presence, a couple of different websites, two company stores. And it takes money to keep all this up on the internet. Now and then I need office supplies too, like that just so happens this coming month I'm going to have to go out and buy some. Some of this I do it out of my own pocket, just to keep this website up, just to keep this channel up. Because of that, we are now registered nonprofits on PayPal and on Stripe.com. The instructions for sending donations can be found in the comment section at the bottom of your screen there. Just scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there you'll see it. The instructions for making donations. If you can't make a donation, then maybe you'd like to become a member. Membership is $5 a month or $50 a year, which works out to 16 cents a day. So it's really, really cheap. For membership, you get 2 blog posts a week or more, 2 video postings each week, and sometimes more. You get access to all my archives, which date back to 2018. You get access to hundreds of other writers writing in all different genres, right alongside of me, my co-workers, so to speak. You'll have access to all that too. Besides that, we've got merchandise, special promotions from time to time that are accessible and available only to members. And access to both of our online stores. So, there you have it in a nutshell. Don't forget to give me a like and a share, or 2, and a subscribe. Subscriptions to the YouTube channel and to just the text version of the blog is free. It's only the premium stuff that I loaded up there for you. It costs the $5 a month. It does help us along, so please consider doing so. Please consider your membership with this online church here. Again, my name is Reverend Paul J. Bern. I'm the pastor and the janitor. And I'm really, really happy that you came along and watched this. I hope everybody got a blessing out of this. I hope this helps somebody. Maybe even, I hope this led somebody to ask Jesus into their heart. To let him come and live there and stay there for the rest of your life. So that you can be at one, in unison with Christ. In unison with Christ. Nothing could be better. I want to thank everybody for the privilege of your time. All of you are ever so much appreciated. Having run out of other things to say for the time being, everybody be blessed. Yes, I said be blessed. In Jesus' mighty name.